Gloria Hayes stood frozen before the business-class restroom door, her face calm, but her eyes sharp as winter ice. Flight attendant Brenda Calloway had just blocked her path with words dripping in contempt, unaware that the black woman before her was a senior Federal Aviation Administration inspector. Inside Gloria's vest pocket, her FAA badge buzzed with an urgent message: immediate compliance check authorized. This flight was about to become Brenda's career nightmare. Gloria's voice cut through the cabin tension like a blade. "Ma'am, I suggest you step aside. What happens in the next 3 hours will determine whether this airline keeps its operating certificate." Brenda laughed dismissively, utterly oblivious that she had just awakened a sleeping tiger. Before we dive into what happened next, we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their skin color, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this story unfolds. The twists ahead will leave you speechless. Now let's rewind and see how Gloria ended up in this shocking confrontation 35,000 feet above ground. Gloria Hayes was not a woman who sought confrontation, but she was no stranger to it either. At 38 years old, she had spent 15 years as a senior inspector with the Federal Aviation Administration, a position she had earned through relentless dedication and an unwavering commitment to aviation safety. Her educational background was impeccable: a degree in aeronautical engineering from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, followed by years working as an aerospace engineer before transitioning into federal oversight. She wore her credentials not as a badge of arrogance, but as armor against a world that constantly questioned whether a black woman belonged in spaces dominated by white men. That morning, as she dressed in her tailored gray suit, fastened her gold-rimmed glasses, and braided her hair into neat cornrows, she had no idea that this routine business trip would become a defining moment in her career. Gloria lived in Arlington, Virginia, a quiet suburb just outside Washington, D.C., where she raised her 12-year-old daughter Amara as a single mother. 6 years earlier, her husband Charles had died in a commercial aviation accident, a tragedy that had shattered her world, but also crystallized her life's mission: to ensure that no other family would suffer the loss she had endured due to negligence or regulatory failure. Charles had been her rock, her partner, her fiercest advocate in a profession where she often felt like an outsider. His death had left a void that could never be filled, but it had also ignited a fire within her to hold the aviation industry accountable at every level. She carried his memory with her every day, a silent passenger in her thoughts, reminding her why she fought so hard for safety, for justice, for the dignity of every person who stepped onto an aircraft. That Tuesday morning in late September, Gloria arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport at 6 o'clock, 2.5 hours before her scheduled departure to Chicago. She was traveling to attend a regional aviation safety conference, and tucked inside her leather briefcase were confidential inspection reports for 5 major airlines, including preliminary findings that could result in significant regulatory action. Her frequent flyer status with Skywing Airlines had earned her enough miles to upgrade to business class, a small comfort on what would be a long day of meetings and presentations. As she approached the check-in counter, pulling her carry-on luggage behind her, she noticed the line was relatively short. A young white man named Kyle stood behind the counter, his eyes fixed on his computer screen, until Gloria stepped forward and placed her confirmation number and driver's license on the counter. Kyle glanced at her documents, then at her face, then back at the screen. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a tightening around his eyes, a slight downturn of his mouth. "Are you sure this is your account?" he asked, his tone laced with skepticism. Gloria felt the familiar prickle of frustration but kept her voice steady. "Yes, that's my account. I've been a member for over a decade." Kyle clicked through several screens, his brow furrowed as if he were solving a complex puzzle. "I'm going to need additional identification," he said finally. Gloria reached into her purse and pulled out her passport. Kyle examined it, flipping through the pages with exaggerated thoroughness. "Do you have anything else? Maybe a credit card with your name on it?" Gloria's patience was wearing thin, but she complied, handing over her American Express card. Behind her, a white passenger stepped into the adjacent line and was checked in within 60 seconds, his single driver's license sufficient to satisfy the agent. Gloria made a mental note of the discrepancy, pulling out her phone and discreetly typing a note into her digital log. Check-in agent Kyle counters 7 excessive verification requirements, racial profiling suspected. After what felt like an eternity but was only 8 minutes, Kyle finally printed her boarding pass. "You're all set," he said without a smile, handing her the documents. Gloria took them and walked toward the security checkpoint, her jaw clenched but her composure intact. She had been through this routine countless times, the subtle and not-so-subtle ways that her blackness marked her as suspicious, as out of place, as someone who needed to prove her right to exist in spaces that others occupied. Without question. She thought about Amara, her bright, beautiful daughter who had come home from school just last week in tears because a teacher had accused her of cheating on a math test simply because she had scored higher than any student in the Mara class. The teacher had eventually been forced to apologize when Amara retook the test under supervision and achieved an even higher score, but the damage had been done. The message had been sent, "You don't belong here, and we will question your legitimacy at every turn." At the TSA security checkpoint, Gloria placed her laptop, shoes, and carry-on bag on the conveyor belt and walked through the metal detector without incident. She was retrieving her belongings when a uniformed officer named Garrett approached her. "Ma'am, you've been randomly selected for additional screening," he announced loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Gloria knew there was nothing random about it. She had flown out of this airport dozens of times and had been randomly selected more often than statistical probability would suggest. Of course, she replied, her voice devoid of emotion. Garrett led her to a separate area where he began unpacking her carry-on bag, removing each item and placing it on a stainless steel table for inspection. Her work laptop, confidential documents, cosmetics case, prescription medications, and a small toolkit containing calipers and gauges used for technical measurements were all laid out like evidence at a crime scene. Garrett held up the measuring instruments, turning them over in his hands with exaggerated scrutiny. "What are these for?" he asked, his tone suggesting she might be smuggling contraband. "They're tools for my job," Gloria explained. "I'm an aviation inspector. Those are standard measurement devices used in aircraft compliance checks." Garrett didn't seem convinced. He called over his supervisor, a middle-aged white woman named Janet, who examined the tools with equal suspicion. "Do you have documentation proving these are work-related?" Janet asked. Gloria felt her blood pressure rising, but forced herself to remain calm. "I can have my office verify my credentials if necessary," she offered. Janet nodded and handed Gloria a phone. Gloria dialed her colleague Marcus at the FAA regional office, explaining the situation. Marcus confirmed her identity and the legitimacy of the equipment, and after 25 minutes of unnecessary delay, Gloria was finally cleared to proceed. As she repacked her belongings, she watched a white businessman in an expensive suit walk through the checkpoint with a laptop and a bag full of electronic devices without a second glance from security. It was now 7:45 in the morning, and Gloria had only 45 minutes until boarding began. She made her way through the terminal, stopping briefly at a coffee shop to purchase 2 large Americanos, knowing she would need the caffeine to get through the day ahead. As she sipped her coffee and walked toward gate D27, she thought about Charles again. He had always told her that the system would never change unless people like them held it accountable, that silence in the face of injustice was complicity. She had promised him in those final moments before he slipped away in the hospital that she would never stop fighting, never stop speaking up, never stop demanding that the world see her and people like her as fully human. She didn't know it yet, but that promise was about to be tested in ways she could never have imagined. Gloria arrived at gate D27 at 8:18 in the morning, 12 minutes before the scheduled boarding time. The gate area was crowded with travelers, some seated and scrolling through their phones, others standing impatiently near the boarding lanes. Gloria joined the priority boarding line, her platinum frequent flyer status, granting her early access to the aircraft. When her turn came, she handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, a young woman named Ashley, whose smile faltered the moment she looked up from the scanner and saw Gloria's face. Ashley's eyes traveled from Gloria's cornrows to her tailored suit to the leather carry-on bag at her side, and something shifted in her expression. "Ma'am, are you sure you're in the right boarding group? This is business class," Ashley said, her voice polite but laced with doubt. Gloria handed her the boarding pass again, pointing to the clearly printed seat assignment. "Yes, I'm in seat 3A. Ashley scanned the pass a second time, then a third, as if the machine might reveal some hidden error. She picked up her radio and spoke into it quietly. "I have a situation here at D27. Within moments, a supervisor named Derek appeared his badge, identifying him as a gate operations manager. He looked at Ashley's screen, then at Gloria, then back at the screen. "There must be some mistake," he said, his tone suggesting that Gloria was the source of the error. "This passenger was upgraded from economy. We need to verify this is legitimate." Gloria felt the familiar heat of anger rising in her chest, but channeled it into icy composure. "There is no mistake. I used my accumulated miles to upgrade. Everything is in order." Derek clicked through several screens on the computer, his lips pressed into a thin line. Behind Gloria, other passengers were beginning to board, moving smoothly through the process, without any additional scrutiny. A white couple in their 60s handed their passes to another agent and were waved through with smiles and pleasantries. Gloria stood there for 5 minutes while Derek and Ashley conferred in hushed tones, their eyes occasionally darting toward her as if she might suddenly confess to some elaborate fraud. Finally, Derek nodded curtly. "Everything appears to be in order. You may board." Gloria took her boarding pass without a word, her jaw tight as she walked down the jet bridge. She made a mental note in her phone: "Gate agents D27, discriminatory verification process, delayed boarding without cause." The jet bridge was empty, and quiet, the sound of her footsteps echoing off the metal walls. When she stepped into the aircraft, the temperature difference hit her immediately. The cool, recycled air, a stark contrast to the humid Atlanta morning. A flight attendant named Melissa stood at the entrance, greeting passengers with a practiced smile that dimmed noticeably when Gloria came into view. "Welcome aboard," Melissa said, her voice flat and perfunctory, lacking the warmth she had extended to the passengers ahead of Gloria. Gloria made her way down the aisle towards seat 3A, a window seat in the third row of the business class cabin. The cabin was spacious and elegantly appointed, with wide leather seats that reclined into lie-flat beds, personal entertainment screens, and ample overhead storage. Gloria lifted her carry-on bag into the compartment above her seat, settled into the plush leather, and exhaled deeply. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to relax, grateful to finally be seated after the gauntlet she had endured at check-in and security. She pulled out her laptop, intending to review her presentation materials for the conference, but before she could open the device, a presence loomed over her. Gloria looked up to see the senior flight attendant, a woman whose name tag identified her as Brenda Calloway. Brenda was approximately 50 years old, with meticulously styled blonde hair, heavy makeup, and an air of authority that bordered on arrogance. She glanced at Gloria with an expression that mingled curiosity and disdain before moving on without a word. Moments later, a white man in his early 60s settled into seat 3B directly next to Gloria. Mr. Harrison, as his boarding pass identified him, was dressed in an expensive navy suit and carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He glanced at Gloria, then up at the overhead bin, then back at Gloria before waving Brenda over. "Excuse me, is this seat assignment correct?" he asked, his tone suggesting that sitting next to Gloria was beneath his station. Brenda checked her electronic tablet and nodded. "Yes, sir, that's your assigned seat." Mr. Harrison frowned. "I specifically requested to sit next to someone of my professional level," he said, his words dripping with condescension. Gloria heard every word, but refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. She continued typing on her laptop, her fingers moving steadily across the keyboard, as if she were entirely alone. Brenda leaned in slightly and lowered her voice, though not enough to prevent Gloria from hearing. "I apologize for the inconvenience, sir. Let me see if we can arrange something more suitable for you." Gloria's fingers paused on the keyboard for just a fraction of a second before resuming their rhythm. She had learned long ago that responding to such insults only escalated the situation and fed the narrative that she was the problem. Instead, she documented, She opened a new file on her laptop and began typing a detailed account of everything that had transpired since she arrived at the airport, complete with timestamps, names, and direct quotes. This was not anger, it was evidence. As the boarding process continued, Brenda moved through the cabin, offering pre-departure beverages to business class passengers. She stopped at each row, smiling warmly and asking, "Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am. Can I get you anything before takeoff?" Champagne, orange juice, sparkling water. She worked her way methodically through rows 1 and 2, delivering drinks with the efficiency of someone who had performed this ritual thousands of times. When Brenda reached row 3, she stopped at Mr. Harrison's seat and beamed at him. "Sir, would you like a pre-departure beverage? We have champagne, orange juice, or sparkling water." Mr. Harrison ordered champagne, and Brenda hurried off to retrieve it. Gloria waited, assuming Brenda would return to take her order as well, but when the flight attendant returned with Mr. Harrison's drink, she handed it to him and moved on to row 4 without acknowledging Gloria's existence. Gloria cleared her throat and spoke up. "Excuse me, may I have sparkling water, please?" Brenda turned back slowly, her expression one of mild annoyance. "We serve beverages after takeoff," she said curtly. Gloria gestured toward Mr. Harrison's champagne glass. "But you just offered him a pre-departure drink." Brenda's smile was tight and cold. "Business class passengers receive priority service." Gloria's response was measured and deliberate. "I am a business class passenger. My seat is 3A. Brenda glanced at the seat number displayed on the small screen above Gloria's head, her lips pursing as if she had tasted something sour. "I'll see what I can do," she said, her tone making it clear that she had no intention of following through. True to form, Brenda never returned with the water. Instead, Gloria watched as the flight attendant continued through the cabin, delivering pre-departure champagne to 8 other passengers, all of whom were white. She also observed that 2 other black passengers seated in row 6 near the back of the business class cabin were similarly overlooked. Gloria took out her phone and discreetly photographed the seat map displayed on her screen, then made another note in her log. "Pre-departure beverage service denied to black passengers. Time 8:37 a.m. Flight attendant Brenda Calloway." The aircraft door closed at 8:42, and the pilots began their pre-flight announcements. Gloria closed her eyes as the plane pushed back from the gate and began taxiing toward the runway. As the engines roared to life and the aircraft accelerated down the tarmac, Gloria thought about Charles once more. If he were still alive, what would he say about this moment? She could almost hear his voice, steady and reassuring. "Don't let them break you, Gloria. You're there for a reason." The plane lifted off the ground, and Atlanta disappeared beneath a blanket of clouds. Gloria opened her eyes, her resolve hardening like steel. This flight would not pass quietly into the annals of forgotten injustices. She would make sure of that. 45 minutes into the flight, the seatbelt sign chimed off, and passengers began to move about the cabin. Gloria had consumed 2 large cups of coffee before boarding, and the combination of caffeine and nerves was now demanding attention. She unbuckled her seatbelt, stood up, and made her way toward the business class restroom located near the galley, just a few rows ahead of her seat. There were 2 lavatories in this section of the aircraft, one on the left side and one on the right. The door to the left lavatory was open, the small vacant sign illuminated in green. Gloria was about to step inside when she heard a sharp voice behind her. "Excuse me, ma'am, that restroom is reserved." Gloria turned to find Brenda Calloway standing in the aisle, her arms crossed over her chest, blocking Gloria's path. Gloria blinked in confusion. "Reserved? There's no sign indicating that." Brenda's expression was impatient, as if she were explaining something obvious to a child. "It's for premium business class passengers only." Gloria glanced down at her boarding pass, which she still held in her hand. "I am a business class passenger. My seat is 3A. Brenda shook her head slowly, as if Gloria were being deliberately obtuse. "That facility is for passengers in rows 1 and 2. You'll need to use the restroom at the rear of the aircraft." Gloria knew immediately that this was a fabrication. She had reviewed Federal Aviation Administration regulations countless times as part of her job, and there was no provision allowing airlines to restrict restroom access based on seat rows within the same cabin class. The policy was clear. All passengers in a given class had equal access to the amenities designated for that class. Gloria kept her voice calm and professional. "Ma'am, I'm familiar with airline regulations. There is no such policy. Please step aside." Brenda's face flushed slightly, and she raised one hand to physically block the lavatory entrance. "I'm the senior flight attendant on this aircraft, and I'm telling you that restroom is currently occupied." Gloria looked past Brenda into the lavatory, where the door stood wide open and the interior was clearly empty. "The door is open, and the restroom is obviously unoccupied." Brenda's jaw tightened. "It's being cleaned." Gloria raised an eyebrow. "By whom? I don't see anyone cleaning it." Brenda's voice rose slightly, attracting the attention of nearby passengers. "Ma'am, if you don't comply with crew instructions, I will have to call the captain. Interfering with crew duties is a federal offense." The threat hung in the air like a dark cloud. Around them, passengers began to turn in their seats, craning their necks to see what the commotion was about. Mr. Harrison, seated in 3B, called out from his seat. "Is there a problem here?" Brenda turned toward him, her expression softening instantly. "Just a passenger who doesn't understand protocol, sir. Nothing to worry about." Mr. Harrison smirked. "Maybe she should go back to economy where she belongs." A few passengers chuckled, and Gloria felt the weight of their collective judgment pressing down on her. But she did not flinch. She had faced worse, and she had survived. She looked directly into Brenda's eyes, her voice steady and cold as winter. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one more time to step aside. After that, I will file a formal complaint for discriminatory conduct under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Brenda laughed a harsh, mocking sound. "File whatever you want, honey. Now move along before I call security." Gloria reached into her pocket and pulled out her smartphone, opening the camera app and switching to video mode. She held the phone up, pointing the lens at Brenda. "For the record, I am attempting to use a restroom that is clearly available, and I am being denied access by Flight Attendant Brenda Calloway." Brenda's eyes widened in alarm. "You can't record on an aircraft." Gloria's response was immediate and precise. "Actually, passengers have the right to record non-secure areas of the aircraft unless explicitly prohibited by the captain." "Would you like me to cite the specific regulation?" Brenda hesitated, clearly caught off guard by Gloria's knowledge of aviation law. "What's your employee ID number?" Gloria asked her phone, still recording. Brenda stammered, "I don't have to give you that information." Gloria's eyes flicked to the name tag, pinned to Brenda's uniform. "Brenda Calloway, employee number SW7834. Noted." She lowered her phone and stopped the recording, slipping the device back into her pocket. Brenda's confidence had begun to crack, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. Gloria did not answer. Instead, she turned and walked calmly back to her seat, her posture erect and her stride measured. She could feel Brenda's eyes boring into her back, could sense the confusion and unease radiating from the flight attendant. Gloria sat down, opened her laptop, and immediately began drafting an email to the FAA regional office in Atlanta. The subject line read, "In-Flight Discrimination Incident, SWA, Flight 2847, Immediate Action Required." She attached the video she had just recorded, along with photographs of her boarding pass, timestamps of each incident, and detailed notes describing every interaction since she had checked in that morning. As Gloria typed, Brenda stood frozen in the aisle, her mind racing. Something about this passenger was different. Most people, when confronted by a flight attendant asserting authority, either backed down or became belligerent. This woman had done neither. She had remained calm, cited regulations, and documented everything with the precision of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Brenda felt a cold knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. She picked up the intercom handset and pressed the button to connect to the cockpit. "Captain, this is Brenda. We may have a difficult passenger in business class. Just wanted to give you a heads up." The captain's voice crackled back through the speaker. "Understood. Keep me posted if the situation escalates." Brenda hung up the handset and glanced back at Gloria, who was typing furiously on her laptop, her expression unreadable. For the first time in her 22-year career as a flight attendant, Brenda Calloway felt genuinely afraid. 30 minutes after the bathroom incident, the cabin crew began preparing for the in-flight meal service. Melissa wheeled a cart laden with covered trays down the aisle, Brenda supervising from close behind. The aroma of herb-crusted chicken and pan-seared salmon filled the cabin, and passengers looked up expectantly as the cart approached their rows. Brenda stopped at row 1 and smiled warmly at the elderly couple seated there. "Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am. Today we have herb-crusted chicken or pan-seared salmon. Which would you prefer?" The couple made their selections, and Brenda carefully arranged their meals on fold-down tray tables, adding linen, napkins, silverware wrapped in cloth, and small bottles of wine. She chatted amiably with them, asking if they were traveling for business or pleasure, complimenting the woman's scarf. It was a masterclass in customer service, the kind of warm, personalized attention that made passengers feel valued. The same treatment was extended to row 2, where a businessman requested the salmon and a glass of Chardonnay. Brenda poured the wine herself, making sure to angle the bottle properly and wipe the rim with a napkin before placing it on his tray. When the cart reached row 3, Brenda approached Mr. Harrison first. "Good morning, sir. We have chicken or salmon today." "Mr." Harrison selected the salmon and a glass of white wine, and Brenda served him with the same meticulous care she had shown the previous passengers. Then she turned to Gloria. Without a word, without a smile, Brenda placed a small tray on Gloria's table. It contained a single snack box, the kind typically distributed in economy class, filled with crackers, cheese, and a small piece of chocolate. There was no main course, no wine, no linen napkin. Brenda moved on to row 4, as if nothing were amiss. Gloria stared at the snack box in disbelief. She looked to her left, where Mr. Harrison was cutting into a perfectly cooked piece of salmon accompanied by roasted vegetables and wild rice. She looked ahead to rows 1 and 2, where every passenger had received a full meal. Then she looked behind her to rows 4 and 5, where white passengers were also being served complete dinners. Gloria raised her hand to get Brenda's attention. "Excuse me, where is my meal?" Brenda turned slowly, her face a mask of feigned confusion. "That is your meal." Gloria gestured toward the cart, which still held several unopened meal trays. "Other business class passengers received a full meal. I was told we could choose between chicken and salmon." Brenda's expression hardened. "We're running low on supplies. That's all we have left." Gloria could see at least 6 meals remaining on the cart, their foil covers glinting under the cabin lights. "There are clearly meals right there," she said, pointing. Brenda's voice took on a condescending tone. "Those are reserved for passengers who pre-ordered their meals." Gloria knew this was another lie. Skywing Airlines did not require pre-orders for business class meals. They were included as part of the ticket price. Gloria pulled out her phone and took a photograph of the snack box on her tray. Then another photograph of Mr. Harrison's full meal beside her. She then stood slightly and took a wide-angle shot of the passengers in rows 1, 2, 4, and 5, all enjoying complete dinners. Brenda's eyes widened in alarm. "Ma'am, you need to stop taking photographs." Gloria sat back down and continued typing on her phone.
"I'm documenting evidence of discriminatory service, which is my right as a passenger."
Brenda's face flushed red. "I'm going to have to ask you to put that phone away or I'll confiscate it." Gloria looked up calmly. "Under what authority? Please cite the regulation that allows you to confiscate a passenger's personal property for taking photographs in a non-secure area of the aircraft." Brenda opened her mouth to respond but found herself without an answer. She turned abruptly and pushed the meal cart toward the back of the cabin, her movements jerky and aggressive. But the discrimination did not end with Gloria. When the cart reached row 6, where 2 black women named Denise Williams and Kenya Johnson were seated, Brenda handed each of them a snack box, identical to the one she had given Gloria. Denise, a schoolteacher from Detroit, looked at the box in confusion. "Excuse me, I thought we were getting a meal. I saw everyone else getting chicken or salmon." Brenda's response was curt. "We've run out of meals. If you have complaints, you can take it up with customer service after we land." Kenya, a nurse from Chicago, was less willing to accept the dismissal. "This is ridiculous. We paid the same price as everyone else in this cabin. How can you run out of meals when there are clearly trays left on that cart?" Brenda's voice rose. "Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice. If you continue to cause a disturbance, I will have you removed from the aircraft." Denise stood up, her voice shaking with anger. "This is racial discrimination. You gave meals to every white person in business class, but not to us." Several passengers turned to watch the confrontation, some with expressions of discomfort, others with barely concealed hostility. Gloria, who had been observing the exchange from 3 rows ahead, unbuckled her seatbelt and walked back to row 6. She placed a hand gently on Denise's shoulder. "Don't worry, I'm documenting everything. We'll address this properly." Denise looked at Gloria with a mixture of relief and confusion. "Who are you?" Gloria handed Denise a business card, but she held her thumb over the part that identified her as an FAA inspector. "Let's just say I work in aviation oversight. Make sure you keep your boarding passes and take photographs of everything that's happening." Kenya nodded, pulling out her own phone and snapping pictures of her snack box and the meals visible on other passengers' trays. Brenda stormed over, her face contorted with barely controlled rage.
"Ma'am, return to your seat immediately."
Gloria turned to face her.
"I'm simply speaking with fellow passengers."
Brenda pointed toward the front of the cabin. "You are causing a disturbance. Sit down now, or I will call the captain, and we will divert this aircraft to the nearest airport." The threat was serious. Diverting an aircraft was an extreme measure that could result in the offending passenger being arrested by law enforcement upon landing. But Gloria knew that Brenda was bluffing. Diverting a flight cost airlines tens of thousands of dollars and required justification to both the FAA and the airline's operations center. A passenger standing and talking to other passengers did not meet that threshold. Still, Gloria did not want to escalate the situation into something that might jeopardize her ability to complete her investigation. She nodded slowly. "I'll return to my seat. But this is not over." As Gloria walked back toward row 3, Brenda muttered under her breath, just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Some people just don't know their place." Gloria heard it, but did not respond. She sat down, opened her laptop, and sent another email, this time directly to her supervisor, Douglas Martin at the FAA. "Need immediate authorization for unscheduled compliance inspection upon landing. Multiple Title VI violations, observed safety issues present. Request regional inspectors meet aircraft at gate." Douglas replied within 2 minutes. "Authorization granted. Inspectors will be waiting. Document everything." Gloria allowed herself a small, grim smile. The trap was set. All she had to do now was wait. Before we continue with what happened next, I want to pause and ask you something important. If you've ever experienced discrimination or witnessed someone being treated unfairly because of their race, comment number 1 below. And if you believe that people like Brenda should face consequences for their actions, smash that like button and make sure you're subscribed to this channel with notifications turned on, because the next part of this story is going to blow your mind. Gloria is about to reveal who she really is, and Brenda's world is about to come crashing down. What do you think will happen when Brenda finally discovers the truth? Will she apologize? Will she double down? Drop your predictions in the comments, and let's see who gets it right. Now let's get back to the story. 20 minutes after the meal service concluded, a call button chimed from the back of the business class cabin. Denise, still upset from the earlier confrontation, had decided to use the lavatory in the economy section rather than risk another encounter with Brenda. As she walked through the curtain dividing business class from economy, she noticed something that made her stop in her tracks. In seat 28C, near the emergency exit row, a young mother was holding an infant no more than 3 months old on her lap. The baby was not secured in any way, and the mother appeared to be dozing her head, lolling to one side, as the aircraft encountered light turbulence. Denise, who worked as a social worker and had completed training in child safety, immediately recognized the danger. Infants were required to be held securely during flight, and while the FAA allowed children under 2 to sit on an adult's lap without a separate seat, they had to be properly restrained. But the issue was far more serious than just the infant's lack of restraint. Denise looked up and saw the sign above row 28, emergency exit row. Her heart began to race. She knew that passengers seated in exit rows had specific responsibilities in the event of an emergency, and federal regulations explicitly prohibited anyone traveling with children from occupying those seats. The reason was simple. In an emergency evacuation, passengers in exit rows were responsible for opening the heavy exit door and assisting others, and having a child would make that impossible. Denise hurried to find a flight attendant locating Melissa in the economy galley. "Excuse me, there's a baby in seat 28C, and that's an exit row. I don't think that's allowed." Melissa walked over to inspect the situation, her expression shifting from irritation to concern when she saw the sleeping mother and infant. "Oh, you're right. Let me take care of this." Melissa gently woke the mother and explained that she would need to move to a different seat. The mother, groggy and confused, gathered her belongings and relocated to seat 22 FA, non-exit row seat, near the rear of the economy cabin. Denise returned to her seat in business class, but 10 minutes later, she glanced back and noticed that the mother had fallen asleep again, and the infant was once more inadequately secured, nearly slipping from her arms as the plane hit. Another patch of turbulence. Denise called Melissa over again. "This is getting dangerous. The baby almost fell." Melissa sighed. "I've already reminded her once. There's nothing more I can do." Denise, frustrated and worried, returned to her seat and told Kenya what she had witnessed. Kenya leaned over the aisle and quietly informed Gloria. Gloria's attention sharpened immediately. She stood up and walked to the back of the business class cabin, peering through the curtain into economy. From her vantage point, she could see the mother in seat 22F and the infant squirming on her lap. But something else caught Gloria's eye. She looked at the original seat 28C and saw the exit row placard clearly visible. Gloria walked into the economy cabin, ignoring the surprised looks from passengers, and approached Melissa, who was organizing beverage supplies in the galley. "Excuse me, I noticed that a passenger with an infant was originally seated in row 28C, which is an exit row." Melissa nodded. "Yes, we've already moved her." Gloria's voice was calm but firm. That passenger should never have been allowed to board with that seat assignment. Seating an infant in an exit row is a direct violation of Title 14 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 91, Section 107. It compromises the safety of everyone on this aircraft. Melissa's face went pale. I didn't catch it during boarding. There were so many passengers and I was focused on other things." Gloria's expression remained neutral. "Where is the senior flight attendant?" Melissa hesitated, then called Brenda over the intercom. When Brenda appeared, she saw Gloria standing in the economy galley, and her expression immediately soured. "What are you doing back here? Return to your seat." Gloria pointed toward row 28. "There's a safety violation. A passenger with an infant was seated in an exit row. That's a federal offense." Brenda walked over to inspect the row, her face going from annoyed to horrified as she realized the gravity of the mistake. She turned to Melissa, her voice sharp. "Why didn't you catch this during boarding?" Melissa stammered an apology, but Brenda cut her off. She then looked at Gloria, her pride still preventing her from showing gratitude. "Thank you for pointing it out. We've already addressed it." Gloria crossed her arms. "I want to see documentation that she's been moved to an appropriate seat and that this incident is logged in the flight report." Brenda bristled. "We don't need a passenger telling us how to do our jobs." Gloria's patience had reached its limit. "Move her now, document it properly, or I will report this directly to the captain and the FAA." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "Who do you think you are?" Gloria's response was calm but carried an undercurrent of steel. "Someone who knows the regulations better than you do, apparently." The two women stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. Finally, Brenda turned to Melissa. "Document the seat change, and make sure it's in the report." Melissa nodded and hurried to comply. While this was happening, Gloria took out her phone and photographed the exit row placard, the seat number, and the time displayed on her watch. She made detailed notes about the violation, including the names of the crew members involved and the approximate time the passenger had been moved. As she walked back to her seat, she could feel Brenda's eyes following her, filled with a mixture of anger and growing apprehension. Back in the galley, Brenda turned to Melissa and Ramon, the third flight attendant. "Something is seriously wrong with that passenger. She knows too much. I think we need to inform the captain." Ramon, who had been observing from a distance, nodded. "I've been saying that. She quoted specific FAA regulations. That's not normal." Melissa bit her lip nervously. What if she's a lawyer? Or a reporter? Brenda's mind was racing, trying to piece together who this woman could be. She returned to the cockpit and knocked on the door. Captain Mitchell Ford opened it slightly. Yes, Brenda. Brenda explained the situation, describing Gloria's interventions and her knowledge of regulations. The captain frowned and pulled up the passenger manifest on his screen. He typed in Gloria's name and waited for the system to load her profile. What he saw made his stomach drop. Next to Gloria Hayes' name was a special code, Priority Passenger Government Official. The captain's expression grew serious. Brenda, did you have any issues with this passenger earlier in the flight? Brenda hesitated. She's been difficult. Demanding things, taking photos, interfering with other passengers. The captain's frown deepened. What kind of things did she demand? Brenda described the bathroom and meal incidents, and with each word, the captain's concern grew more evident. Brenda, this passenger is flagged as a federal official. If she files a complaint, this could be very serious for all of us. Brenda felt her blood run cold. Federal official? What kind? The captain shook his head. It doesn't specify, but we need to be extremely careful. Go back and make sure everything is handled professionally from this point forward. No more issues. Brenda nodded, her hands trembling slightly, and left the cockpit. She stood in the galley for a moment, trying to compose herself. Her mind was racing. Federal official, government, FAA regulations. The pieces were starting to come together, and the picture they formed was terrifying. An hour before the scheduled landing in Chicago, the aircraft encountered a patch of moderate turbulence over Missouri. The seatbelt sign chimed on, and the captain's voice came over the intercom. Flight attendants, please take your seats immediately. Brenda and Melissa were in the galley cleaning up the last of the meal service trays. They hurriedly secured the beverage cart and the trash bin, but in their haste, Brenda failed to properly lock the wheels on the cart. As the plane hit a particularly rough patch of air, the cart began to roll slowly down the aisle. Brenda lunged for it, but another jolt of turbulence knocked her off balance, and the cart picked up speed. It careened toward row 7, where Mr. Patterson, an elderly man in his 70s, had his leg extended slightly into the aisle. The heavy metal cart struck his shin with a sickening thud. Mr. Patterson cried out in pain, clutching his leg as the cart continued its erratic path until Melissa managed to grab it and bring it to a stop. Gloria, who had been seated with her laptop open, immediately unbuckled her seatbelt, despite the illuminated seatbelt sign, and rushed to Mr. Patterson's side. "Sir, are you okay? Can you move your leg, mister?" Patterson's face was contorted in pain. "It hurts like hell. I think something's broken." Gloria knelt down beside him, gently examining the injury. There was already significant swelling and a large bruise forming on his shin, though there was no obvious sign of a fracture. "We need ice and compression immediately," Gloria said, looking up at Brenda. Brenda, still shaken from the incident, stammered, "You need to sit down. The turbulence is still ongoing." Gloria's voice was firm. "Get the first aid kit now. This man needs immediate attention." Melissa, recognizing the urgency, retrieved the kit from the overhead compartment and handed it to Gloria. Gloria quickly found an instant ice pack, activated it by squeezing until it turned cold, and applied it to Mr. Patterson's leg. She then wrapped the injury with a compression bandage from the kit, securing it gently but firmly. Mr. Patterson looked up at Gloria with gratitude. "Thank you, ma'am. You seem to know what you're doing." Gloria smiled slightly. "I've had some training." Once Mr. Patterson was stabilized and the turbulence subsided, Brenda was summoned to the cockpit via the intercom. She walked to the front of the plane, her heart pounding, and knocked on the cockpit door. Captain Ford opened it and gestured for her to step inside. "What happened back there? I heard someone was injured." Brenda explained the incident with a beverage cart, her voice shaky. "It was an accident. The turbulence hit us unexpectedly, and the cart got away from me." The captain's expression was stern. "Did you secure the cart properly?" Before the turbulence, Brenda hesitated. "I thought I did, but maybe I didn't lock the wheels all the way." The captain sighed heavily. "This is going to have to be included in the incident report." Was the injury serious? Brenda shook her head. "A passenger helped with first aid. It's the same one I mentioned earlier, Gloria Hayes." The captain pulled up the passenger manifest again and stared at the screen. "Brenda, this is worse than I thought. That passenger isn't just any government official. He clicked a few more buttons, accessing a deeper level of information that was normally restricted. His face drained of color. She's an FAA inspector, senior level. Brenda felt the floor drop out from under her. FAA, she's with the FAA. The captain nodded grimly. Yes. And if she's been taking notes and photographs all flight, we're in serious trouble. Tell me the truth. Did you deny her any services that other passengers received? Brenda wanted to lie, wanted to say that everything had been fine, but she knew it was too late. I made some service adjustments based on what I thought was appropriate. The captain's voice turned icy. Service adjustments. Brenda, did you discriminate against her? Brenda's silence was answer enough. The captain rubbed his temples. This could cost us our jobs, maybe even the airline's operating license. You need to go back there and fix this. Apologize. Do whatever it takes. Brenda left the cockpit, her legs weak and her mind spinning. She walked slowly back to row 3 where Gloria was typing on her laptop. Brenda forced a smile, though it looked more like a grimace. Miss Hayes, I wanted to thank you for helping with the injured passenger. That was very kind of you. Gloria looked up, her expression unreadable. Just doing what anyone should do. Brenda clasped her hands together, almost pleading. I also wanted to apologize if there were any misunderstandings earlier. Sometimes service can be inconsistent due to supply issues and the demands of operating a full flight. Gloria opened her phone and scrolled through her photo gallery, which was filled with dozens of images documenting every incident. Misunderstandings. You mean when you physically blocked me from using the lavatory? Or when you served me a snack box while every white passenger received a full meal, or when you ignored 2 other black passengers in row 6. Brenda's face went pale. I assure you, it wasn't personal. We were just following standard protocols. Gloria's voice was cold. What protocols I'd love to see. The policy manual that justifies denying service to passengers based on their race. Brenda stammered. I never said anything about race. You're twisting my words. Gloria tapped her phone. I have video. Would you like me to play it back for you? Brenda felt panic rising in her chest. Look, I don't want any trouble. Let me get you a full meal from first class complimentary, and I'll make sure you're upgraded on your next flight. Please, let's just forget this happened. Gloria closed her laptop slowly. It's too late for that. Brenda's voice cracked. Please. I have 2 kids at home. I need this job. I can't lose my job. Gloria's expression did not soften. You should have thought about that before you decided to discriminate against passengers based on the color of their skin. Brenda's eyes filled with tears. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I'll take sensitivity training. I'll apologize publicly. Just please don't report this. Gloria leaned forward slightly. You're going to file a report anyway. But it won't be about my assistance with the injured passenger. It will be about your violations of federal civil rights law and aviation safety regulations. Brenda's voice dropped to a whisper. Violations? What violations? Gloria began ticking them off on her fingers. Discriminatory denial of service, failure to secure equipment, resulting in passenger injury, permitting a passenger with an infant to board in an exit row seat, failure to follow proper pre-departure safety protocols. Should I continue? Brenda stood there, frozen, unable to respond. Finally, she turned and walked back to the galley, her career flashing before her eyes. She found Melissa and Ramon huddled together, their faces pale. We're in big trouble, Brenda said, her voice hollow. That woman is an FAA inspector, a senior one. She's been documenting everything. Melissa's eyes widened. Oh my God. What are we going to do? Brenda shook her head. I don't know. I honestly don't know. 30 minutes before landing, the captain announced the beginning of the descent into Chicago O'Hare. Passengers began to gather their belongings, adjusting their seats to the upright position and stowing their tray tables. Brenda approached Gloria one final time, her voice barely above a whisper. Miss Hayes, I truly apologize for any inconvenience you experienced today. Is there anything at all that I can do to make this right? Gloria closed her laptop and looked directly into Brenda's eyes. You can start by telling me the truth. Why did you treat me and the other black passengers differently than the white passengers? Brenda's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Gloria continued, her voice steady. I watched you serve pre-departure drinks to 8 white passengers but refuse mine. I watched you give every white passenger a full meal while giving snack boxes to the 3 black passengers. I watched you block me from a restroom that was clearly available while allowing white passengers to use it freely. So I'll ask again, why? Brenda's face crumpled. I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to discriminate. It was just how I was raised. And sometimes old habits, they just... She trailed off, realizing she had just admitted exactly what Gloria suspected. Gloria's expression remained stern. Old habits, so you admit you have a pattern of treating black passengers differently. Brenda realized her mistake too late. No, I didn't mean it like that. Gloria held up a hand. Save it. You'll have plenty of time to explain yourself in the formal investigation. Brenda fell to her knees in the aisle, tears streaming down her face. Please, I'm begging you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I have children. I have a mortgage. Please don't destroy my life. Passengers around them were staring, now some with sympathy, others with disgust at the spectacle. Gloria's voice was firm. Stand up, Miss Calloway. You're making a scene. Brenda stood on shaky legs, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Gloria pulled out her phone and made a call. The phone rang twice before a male voice answered. Douglas Martin, FAA Regional Supervisor. Gloria spoke calmly. Douglas, it's Gloria. I'm about to land in Chicago. I need a full inspection team at Gate C-18. Douglas's voice was all business, already arranged. We have 3 inspectors waiting, plus airport security and local law enforcement if needed. Gloria continued, I'm also going to need witness statements from passengers in business class, rows 3 through 8, and from the passengers in economy who observed the exit row violation. Douglas replied, We'll handle it. Anything else? Gloria glanced at Brenda, who was standing a few feet away, trembling. Yes. I want the captain and first officer interviewed separately. I need to know if they were aware of any discriminatory practices or safety violations. Douglas's voice was grim. Understood. Gloria, how bad is it? Gloria paused. Bad enough to potentially suspend Skywing's operating certificate for this route pending a full investigation. Douglas let out a low whistle. Jesus. Okay, we'll be thorough. See you on the ground. Gloria ended the call and looked at Brenda. When we land, you will be escorted off the aircraft by FAA inspectors and airport security. You will give a full statement under oath. Do not leave the airport until you are cleared to do so. Do you understand? Brenda nodded, mutely, her face ashen. Melissa, who had been listening from a few feet away, stepped forward, her voice shaking. Inspector Hayes, I'm going to be questioned too, aren't I? Gloria nodded. Yes. Your level of involvement will be assessed. If you cooperated with discriminatory practices, you will face consequences. If you were simply following orders, that will be taken into account. Melissa glanced at Brenda, then back at Gloria. I didn't want to do it. Brenda told me to treat certain passengers differently. I should have said no, but I was afraid of losing my job. Brenda's head snapped toward Melissa. You're throwing me under the bus. Melissa's voice was barely a whisper. You threw yourself under the bus, Brenda. The plane descended through the clouds, the sprawling cityscape of Chicago coming into view below. Gloria looked out the window and saw the familiar sight of O'Hare International Airport, one of the busiest in the world. As the landing gear deployed with a mechanical groan, she felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and resolve. This was not how she had planned to spend her day, but it was how it had unfolded, and she would see it through to the end. The wheels touched down on the runway with a gentle thud, and the plane began to slow the brakes, engaging with a high-pitched whine. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chicago O'Hare International Airport. The local time is 10:42 a.m. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until the aircraft has come to a complete stop at the gate. As the plane taxied toward the terminal, Gloria could see 3 white vans with Federal Aviation Administration emblazoned on their sides parked near Gate C-18. 2 airport security vehicles were also waiting, their lights flashing silently. Brenda saw them too, and her face went even paler if that were possible. "Oh God," she whispered, "it's really happening." The aircraft came to a stop, and the engines powered down. The captain made another announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. There will be a brief delay before deplaning due to an administrative matter. Thank you for your patience." The door opened and 3 FAA inspectors in dark suits and badges stepped into the cabin. The lead inspector, a tall black man named Kenneth Brooks, walked directly to Gloria's row. "Inspector Hayes," he said with a respectful nod. "We're ready when you are." Gloria stood, shook his hand, and gestured toward Brenda. "The primary subject is Brenda Calloway, senior flight attendant. Secondary subjects are Melissa Turner, flight attendant, and Ramon Diaz, flight attendant. I'll also need statements from several passengers." Kenneth turned to Brenda. "Miss Calloway, please come with us." Brenda's voice was barely audible. "Am I under arrest?" Kenneth shook his head. "No, but you are required to cooperate with this investigation under Title 49 United States Code Section 44709. Refusal to cooperate is a federal offense punishable by fines and imprisonment." Brenda nodded and walked toward the exit on unsteady legs, Melissa and Ramon following behind her. Kenneth then addressed the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the inconvenience. We need to conduct brief interviews with some passengers regarding a safety matter. If your name is called, please remain seated." Everyone else may deplane normally. "We appreciate your cooperation." He read from a list. Mr. Harrison, seat 3. B. Mrs. Pemberton, seat 1. C. Miss Denise Williams, seat 6. A. Miss Kenya Johnson, seat 6. B. Mr. Patterson, seat 7. C. Please remain seated. The named passengers exchanged confused glances, but they complied. The rest of the cabin began to slowly empty passengers, casting curious looks over their shoulders as they left. The FAA team set up a temporary interview area at Gate C-18, closing the gate to other passengers and using the seating area as a makeshift investigation room. Gloria sat alongside Kenneth Brooks and another inspector, LaToya Green, as they prepared to interview the witnesses. The atmosphere was tense, professional, and methodical. Each passenger was called in individually, their statements recorded both on paper and via audio recording devices. The first to be interviewed was Mr. Harrison. Kenneth began with a straightforward question. "Mr. Harrison, did you witness any unusual behavior from the flight crew towards certain passengers?" Mr. Harrison shifted uncomfortably. "Unusual? I don't think so. I was just trying to enjoy my flight." LaToya leaned forward.
"Did you make any comments about the passenger in seat 3A not belonging in business class?" Mr. Harrison's face flushed.
"I might have said something like that, but I was joking. It wasn't serious." Gloria reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, playing back the video she had recorded. Mr. Harrison's voice came through clearly. "Maybe she should go back to economy where she belongs." Mr. Harrison sputtered. "That's out of context. I didn't mean it the way it sounds." Kenneth's expression was impassive. "We'll include your statement in the official report. You're free to go, but you may be contacted for further questioning." Mr. Harrison left his face red with embarrassment and anger. Next was Mrs. Pemberton, the woman from seat 1C who had made disparaging comments during the bathroom incident. LaToya asked, "Can you explain why you said, and I quote, 'If she can't afford business class, she shouldn't be here'?" Mrs. Pemberton crossed her arms defensively. "I was frustrated by all the commotion." "I didn't mean anything by it," Gloria interjected. "Why did you assume she couldn't afford business class?" Mrs. Pemberton had no answer. She left the room quickly, avoiding eye contact. Denise and Kenya were interviewed next, and their statements were clear and consistent. Both women described being denied full meal service, being ignored when they requested beverages, and feeling singled out because of their race. Denise's voice shook as she spoke. "I'm just glad someone finally believed us. This happens all the time, but usually nobody does anything about it." Mr. Patterson, the elderly man who had been injured by the unsecured beverage cart, was interviewed last among the passengers. He confirmed that the cart had not been properly secured and that Brenda had barely acknowledged the incident. "If it hadn't been for that lady in 3A, I'd probably still be sitting there in pain." She knew exactly what to do. Kenneth thanked him and excused him. The crew members were interviewed next, starting with Captain Mitchell Ford. The captain admitted that he had not been aware of any issues until Brenda had contacted him about Gloria being a difficult passenger. When asked if he had investigated her claims, he acknowledged that he had checked the manifest and seen that Gloria was a federal official but had not taken further action. First Officer Angela Reed stated that she had heard some commotion over the intercom but had assumed it was standard passenger issues and had focused on flying the aircraft. Both pilots were visibly nervous, realizing that their lack of oversight could have serious professional consequences. Finally, Brenda was brought into the interview room. She sat down slowly, her hands trembling in her lap. Kenneth began. "Miss Calloway, we have multiple passenger statements, video evidence, and photographic documentation of discriminatory behavior toward passengers based on race. Do you deny these allegations?" Brenda's voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't mean to discriminate. I was just doing my job the way I thought was right." LaToya's tone was sharp. By denying service to black passengers, Brenda began to cry. "It wasn't like that. I was having a bad day. I wasn't thinking clearly." Gloria, who had been silent up to this point, finally spoke. "A bad day does not justify violating federal civil rights law. You made a conscious choice multiple times to treat passengers differently based on the color of their skin. That is the definition of discrimination." Brenda sobbed uncontrollably. "Please, I'll lose everything." "My job, my pension, my reputation. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Kenneth closed his notebook. "Your apology is noted, but it doesn't change what happened. This interview is concluded. You'll receive formal notification of the investigation's findings and any disciplinary actions within 30 days. After 3 hours of interviews and evidence collection, the FAA team compiled their findings. Kenneth handed Gloria a preliminary report. Sufficient evidence for Title VI violations, multiple safety infractions, and crew negligence. Recommend immediate suspension of Miss Calloway pending further review. Airline to be issued formal warning and placed under enhanced oversight. Gloria read through the report, her face expressionless. "Good. Make sure this is filed with the regional office by end of business today?" Kenneth nodded. "Already done. Gloria, you did the right thing. This case is going to set a precedent." Gloria looked out the window at the bustling airport planes, taking off and landing in an endless cycle. "I just hope it makes a real difference," she said quietly. 2 weeks after the incident, Gloria sat in her office at the FAA headquarters in Washington, D.C., reading the final investigation report. The findings were comprehensive and damning. Brenda Calloway had been terminated by Skywing Airlines and placed on a no-fly crew list, effectively ending her career in aviation. She was also fined $25,000 under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Melissa Turner received a 6-month unpaid suspension and was required to complete a comprehensive civil rights training program before being considered for reinstatement. Ramon Diaz, who had attempted to warn Brenda and had not participated in any discriminatory actions, faced no penalties. Skywing Airlines itself was fined $500,000 and ordered to implement a company-wide anti-discrimination training program. The airline would also be under FAA oversight for the next 2 years, with random compliance inspections to ensure adherence to federal regulations. Gloria felt a sense of satisfaction, but it was tempered by sadness. "This should never have happened in the first place," she said aloud to the empty office. Douglas Martin knocked on her door and stepped inside. "Gloria, you did the right thing. This case is already having an impact. We've received 23 new complaints from passengers who felt empowered to speak up after seeing your case in the news." Gloria nodded slowly. "That's good, but I wish it didn't take an FAA inspector being mistreated for people to take these complaints seriously." Douglas sat down across from her. "Change is slow, but it's happening. You're part of that change." A few days later, Skywing Airlines held a press conference. CEO Margaret Delacroix stood before a room full of reporters, her expression somber. "We are deeply ashamed of what occurred on Flight SWA 2847. The behavior exhibited by our crew member was inexcusable and does not reflect our company values. We are implementing immediate changes to ensure this never happens again." A reporter raised her hand. Why did it take an FAA inspector being discriminated against for you to take action? What about all the other passengers who have complained over the years? Margaret paused. We acknowledge that we have not always responded appropriately to complaints. We are reviewing all past complaints and implementing a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination moving forward. Another reporter asked, "Will you compensate the affected passengers?" Margaret nodded. Yes, Miss Hayes, Miss Williams, and Miss Johnson will each receive $50,000 in compensation, plus lifetime complimentary business class travel on Skywing Airlines. Gloria watched the press conference on the television in her office and smiled bitterly. I don't need their money, she murmured. Douglas, who was standing beside her, suggested, take the money and donate it to a civil rights organization. That'll send a message. Gloria nodded. That's exactly what I'll do. A week later, Gloria met Denise and Kenya at a quiet coffee shop in downtown Washington, D.C. The three women sat together, sipping lattes and talking about what had happened. Denise looked at Gloria with admiration. I still can't believe you're an FAA inspector. When I saw you on that plane, I thought you were just another passenger like us. Gloria smiled gently. I am just another passenger. The only difference is I have a badge and the authority to do something about it. Kenya raised her cup. Well, thank God you were on that flight. Most people wouldn't have done what you did. Gloria clinked her cup against Kenya's and Denise's. To justice. Slow, but inevitable. The three women laughed, and for a moment, the weight of what they had been through lifted. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in Georgia, Brenda Calloway sat alone reading the termination letter from Skywing Airlines for the 100th time. Her two children, ages 15 and 12, had asked her why she had lost her job, and she had struggled to find the words to explain. Mommy made a big mistake, she had finally said. Her 12-year-old daughter had asked what kind of mistake. Brenda had taken a deep breath. I treated people badly because of how they looked, and I was wrong. Her 15-year-old son had looked at her with disappointment in his eyes. Are you racist? Mom Brenda had broken down in tears. I don't want to be, but maybe I was. And I'm so sorry. She sat now staring at her laptop screen, searching for resources on how to unlearn bias and become a better person. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but she knew she had to try. Back in Arlington, Gloria walked through her front door at 7 in the evening, exhausted after a long day. Her daughter, Amara, ran up and hugged her tightly. Mom, I saw you on the news. They said you stood up to racism on a plane. You're a hero. Gloria knelt down and looked into her daughter's eyes. I'm not a hero, sweetheart. I just did my job. Amara shook her head. But you could have ignored it. You didn't have to say anything. Gloria pulled her daughter close. Yes, I did. Because if I don't speak up, who will? Amara hugged her mother even tighter. I want to be like you when I grow up. Gloria felt tears prick her eyes. You're already braver than I ever was. That night, Gloria sat by the window in her living room, looking at a photograph of Charles. She whispered, I did it, Charles. I held them accountable. I wish you were here to see it. Her phone buzzed with a message from Douglas. Gloria, the Secretary of Transportation, wants to meet you next week. They're considering you for a promotion to Regional Director. Gloria smiled, but not because of the promotion. She smiled because she knew that even though it was just one case, she had made a difference. She thought about all the future Denises and Kenyas who might now be treated with the dignity they deserved. She thought about all the future Brendas who might think twice before letting their prejudices dictate their actions. And she thought about Amara growing up in a world that was hopefully just a little bit better. 6 months later, Gloria boarded another flight, this time with a different airline. As she stepped into the business class cabin, a flight attendant greeted her with a genuine smile. Welcome aboard. Can I help you with your bag? Gloria smiled back. Thank you. I can manage. She settled into her seat, looked out the window as the plane prepared for takeoff, and felt a sense of peace. This time, the flight was uneventful, but in her pocket, her FAA badge remained always ready. So here's my question for you. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wished you had the courage to speak up? Have you ever been in Gloria's shoes, or maybe in Denise and Kenya's position? Drop a comment below and share your story. And if you believe that accountability matters, that justice, even when it's slow, is worth fighting for, then hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Because stories like Gloria's remind us that change doesn't happen in silence. It happens when ordinary people refuse to accept injustice as normal. It happens when someone somewhere decides that enough is enough. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. I hope it inspired you, challenged you, or at least made you think about how we treat each other. Remember, we all have the power to make a difference whether we have a badge or not. The most powerful weapon against injustice is not always a lawsuit or a protest. Sometimes it's just a quiet, determined person who refuses to be silenced. Gloria didn't just fight for herself that day. She fought for every person who has ever been dismissed, ignored, or degraded because of the color of their skin. And in doing so, she reminded the world that accountability is not optional. It's a requirement. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a woman with a badge, a laptop, and the courage to say, "Not today." Until next time, treat people with kindness, stand up for what's right, and never be afraid to speak the truth. Take care, and I'll see you in the next story. This story teaches us that silence in the face of discrimination is complicity. Gloria Hayes could have quietly endured the mistreatment, filed a complaint after landing, and moved on with her life. Instead, she chose to document every violation, hold people accountable in real time, and use her authority to create lasting change. The lesson here is clear. If you have the power to speak up, you have the responsibility to do so. Discrimination thrives in environments where it goes unchallenged, where victims feel isolated and powerless, and where perpetrators face no consequences. Gloria's actions remind us that accountability is not optional. Whether you're a federal inspector or an everyday citizen, you can document injustice, demand fair treatment, and refuse to accept explanations that don't hold up under scrutiny. Another critical lesson is the importance of knowing your rights. Gloria's knowledge of FAA regulations and civil rights law gave her the tools to challenge Brenda's lies with precision and confidence. Ignorance is often exploited by those who seek to discriminate, but knowledge is a shield against abuse. Finally, this story shows that change happens when individuals refuse to be complicit. Melissa could have stayed silent, but she chose to tell the truth. Denise and Kenya could have accepted their snack boxes without complaint, but they spoke up. Every act of resistance, no matter how small, contributes to a larger movement toward justice and equality. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced discrimination while traveling at work or in everyday life? How did you respond, and what would you do differently if you could go back? Share your story in the comments below, because your voice matters and your experience can inspire others to stand up for what's right. If this story moved, you hit that like button to help spread this message to more people who need to hear it. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss stories that challenge injustice and celebrate courage. And please, share this video with your friends, family, and anyone who believes in equality and dignity for all people. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of a community that refuses to stay silent. Remember, justice doesn't always come easy, but it's always worth fighting for. Stay strong, stay kind, and never be afraid to stand up for what's right. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.